Welcome back to 3D animation. We're still working on rigging our character. Today's lesson we're going to cover just a couple more quick controllers that we can add to this character, and then we're going to dive into skin weight painting and begin to show you how that works and how we can pull on your mesh in different ways depending on how we paint in the skin weights. So let's just add a couple more quick controllers though. I want to add a head controller that just allows me to kind of nod my head, tilt it left to right, all that fun stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a curve again, a NURB circle, and I'm going to bring this, I'm going to scale it down a little bit, and then I'm going to bring it up around the head zone. I'm going to go ahead and hide my character for a second, just so I can see everything a little easier. And I'm going to turn on snapping here. So I'm going to snap to vertex again, or snap to point. And I'm going to get this hopefully right around. My character's a little odd with where his head would be. Normally this would be like the base of the spine, but mine doesn't really have like, or a base of the skull. My character doesn't really have a skull. He's got a big mushy head. So I just want to make sure it's up there. I can still get kind of a tilt to it. I'm going to put it right on one of the one of the joints. That's sort of just above the center of the head. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and rotate this guy vertically, and I'm just going to give this 90 degrees in the channel box editor to get it just right. I think that looks pretty good. Let's see how it looks with my character turned on, just to make sure I can actually access it. Yeah, that's a pretty good size. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and select my controller, give it a name. Actually, I'm going to follow my conventions here, capital HED, and then Control CNTRL. And then I'm going to go to modify and freeze transformations on that. All right. And I'm going to save. And now I'm going to go ahead and hide Pudgy one more time here. And I'm going to grab that and grab that joint that I'm trying to control. And I'm going to go to Constraint, Orient, and I'm going to set this one to all axes. So this will be able to allow me to rotate it X, Y, Z, and apply. I'm going to close that. And I believe, let's give it a shot, test it. There we go. I'll have to work on that. I don't want them to stretch so much, but that's something I can control in skin weight mapping. But I can now make him tilt his head back and forth, which is very nice. Undo that. And definitely be able to make him nod, do kind of a little scrunchy face. Now it's not a point controller, so I can't move him around. It's just on the orientation on rotation. So it allows me to rotate that and keep that constrained within those particular properties. So that's kind of fun, right? And let's go ahead and just drag that down to the chest and shoulders, so that I parent it so that if I do decide to rotate the shoulders, that everything kind of goes with it. So let me unfold. I think that's in my spine. No, where is that guy? Spine. There it is. There's my shoulders. Cool. So let's go find that again. Oops, I realized something happened there. I must have undone the name on it. So that's head control. And I'm going to go ahead and drag that middle click and drag that into my shoulders. Cool. And if I unfold that, there it is with my left arm control, my right arm control, and my head control. And that way, if I decide to still shift my shoulders in any way, everything still goes with them, right? It's a little bit different from this one's a little bit further down at the shoulders. It tilts it in a slightly different way. And like I said, just allows me to have head control without tilting the arms and legs, but then still goes with it if I need to. So with those of you that will have like a more separate head on a neck, that's going to be key. And I would really choose the joint that's right at the base of the skull so you can get a nice pivot off of it. All right, one more controller, and this is a really easy one. This is just a master controller. This doesn't involve any constraints, just to be able to move everything around. I'm just going to make another NURB circle there. I'm going to scale it down just a hair. And I'm just going to call this master controller. There we go. And I'm basically just going to drag all my other controls into there, okay? So I'm going to fold these up real quick, make it easy on myself. So middle click and drag into there. There's one. Drag spine into there. And right leg control into there. And left leg control into there. And now when I grab that, obviously I can take, oh, I still have my snap turned on. Let's turn that off. I can move the whole set around, no problem. Just trying to give myself as many options as possible for being able to control this character as we move forward. So now I've got a head, I've got a master, I've got one for each foot, I've got a hip, I've got a shoulder, an arm or a wrist. You could go in and put controls for each individual finger too. Obviously, particularly if you need to like grip something or articulate something with the fingers. For this particular character, I'm not going to, but I think you get the idea. Each one would be treated just like a little arm, and then you could, be able to curl each finger individually. Okay, so big one next, skin weight painting. I'm going to try and give you a good introduction here. So let's just see an example of what I'm talking about. So if I take my spine control, right, and I start to want to rotate it. You can see as I rotate him forward, he doesn't have a very distinguished waist, Mr. Pudgy here, but it still shouldn't look like that. See how his mesh is all distorted in there and looking kind of tinfoily and kind of crunchy? Well, that's because the mesh it's not being influenced properly from the rigging. I need to get in there and designate with skin weight painting exactly how that should look so it looks a little bit smoother when he bends forward, right? So how do we do that? Well, first thing we're going to do is select Pudgy here. And then we're going to go up to skin. And when we come down, you'll see skin weight maps. Click on the box, and then you'll get the whole skin weight painting. So we get this lovely little skin weight, paint skin weights tool menu. And you'll see over here in the top right, this is how you select each individual joint. Now you're understanding why it's so important to name all of your joints with something that you can recognize. Naming conventions do matter. It's not just for animation, it's also for skin weight mapping. Otherwise, this would be a big jumble and you wouldn't know what's what. So I know I was just pivoting my pelvis control, and so I can go to the pelvis joint there and say, okay, yep, that's about right. And so what you're seeing is anything that's painted white is going to be heavy influence. That part of the mesh will be influenced by the pelvis joint, that kind of center one right here in the middle. And anything that is black is not, and then anything in gray is sort of in between. And I think part of the problem we have here is the distorted areas right where it starts to get gray. So I think I just have to kind of extend that area up a little bit more and then smooth it out a little bit. And you do this with this interactive brush. So first thing I'm going to do is make my brush a little bit bigger. And I do that by holding down the B. You see how if I hit the B key, I get this arrow back and forth. Now if I click, I can make my brush bigger. If I go the other way, it gets smaller. Just holding down B on the keyboard. So I'm going to get it around there, okay? And you'll notice right out of the gate, I'm going to go ahead down here, just below my listing. I already clicked on pelvis. If I click on other things, like there's left leg bottom, mid bottom. There's right leg mid, right leg down at the bottom. So I'm going to get back up at the pelvis. And I also want to turn on the add option because I think I'm going to add some extra influence of white. And the other thing we want to pay attention to is opacity and value. These are kind of like the intensity, and so the higher the value of 1, that's going to be solid white, down to 0, that's going to be black. And then I can also kind of like the degree of that is the opacity. Like, do I want to fade that back to more of a shade of gray? So these two kind of work together. You just kind of have to get used to them and balanced out. I'm going to get them a little bit higher up towards white and then maybe in the middle on opacity. And then I can fade these in. And you can see that's probably a little too much, right? That was pretty intense. It was fixing it, but it just made more crinkles below it. So I'm going to bring the opacity down a little bit. And we're going to see what we can do here. Kind of paint out some of these areas. So right off the bat, I can kind of start to fade this up and get rid of some of the tinfoil here that's happening. There we go. Sometimes a little more clicking is better than a few more clicks instead of just continuously pushing. So right here, just by making this whole area a bit whiter in the main area of where my center pelvis is there, I'm getting rid of a lot of that distortion that was happening. So this is a delicate little dance of back and forth. You can always undo if you don't like what you've done. Used to be that you couldn't undo, but you can definitely undo now without any kind of like weird things happening to your mesh. I undo a lot. And I can kind of paint how I want the mesh to distort. You can already see I got rid of a good bit of that kind of crinkly looking zone as I have them tilt forward. And I can come around the side just to make sure it's not distorting the mesh too much as I come forward. Now, if I, for some reason, went a little too far overboard, I can always undo, like I said. Or I could come over here and go to value and bring it back to black. Now, you'll see it doesn't really do much. What I have to do is go back to replace. And then when I go down to black, you'll see it starts to paint black back in. If I bring up the opacity, you can see it brings the black and kind of reverses it, right? And smooths out areas in a different way. So it's this kind of delicate dance of back and forth depending on where you want it. Now if I do too much, you can see it's starting to like crinkle it again. So I don't want that to happen, right? So it's this kind of delicate back and forth between add, and let me bring that back up to white on that. I wish you could just fade back and forth black and white in the add mode, but I can never get that to go. Even if I put opacity all the way up and fade down to black, it just doesn't do anything until I switch back to replace. And so, you just have to kind of keep going back and forth there. So I'll go to replace, bring my opacity back down, leave it at, so maybe in black or gray, and I'm going to do this delicate balance back and forth. I'm actually going to bring my value back up to white. I think this needs to be, yeah, my best success here is just kind of painting this area back in white until it gets up into this zone just above it. I was doing this earlier when I was just kind of getting my bearings and skin weight mapping again, and that seemed to work the best. And then again, B to make my brush maybe a little bit bigger, kind of soften that out. Maybe bring the opacity down a little bit and just kind of fade. I think if you can soften the zones all the way around, it just helps. I'm just going around the back side, just kind of cleaning up some of these areas as well. You can see it's kind of smoothing out where some of that mesh is being distorted otherwise. And same thing down below here. Just make sure everything looks good. Yeah, I think that's smoothing out nicely. Much better than the tinfoil city that I had before. Now at any point if I want to test to see how this is doing, just hit the Q on your keyboard. You go out of there, and now I can come back and grab Pudgy, and I can grab that controller again, which I believe was my controller right here, my spine controller. And I can rotate again. And you can see I have way less distortion going on. He's got like a nice smooth, it's still stretching a little bit, but it's not distorting like it was before. And now I can, if I go too far in one way or the other, I get a different kind of distortion done on the feet. So I'd have to get in there and paint those out as well and kind of play with that a little bit. As I come down there, you can see maybe I don't want as much influence in that bottom part right above the foot. And if at any point I want to bring this back to normal, I can just come up to my channel box on that controller, type in 0, and there he is, tilted nice back up where he needs to be again. Let's try another one. So I'm going to grab my arm this time. So I'll grab my arm controller, and I'm just going to kind of move that in a little bit. And I'm going to come around to the front here. I have a little bit of an awkward mesh on his right arm. You can see it's kind of like a little denser than it needs to be on the back side. I never got that cleaned up when I was modeling, and now I'm going to pay for it. Compared to my left arm, which is so nice and clean and uniform, you can see his right arm has just a weird like density of vertexes here. So that's why it's important to keep these things balanced when you're doing your modeling, because now I have to deal with this in skin weight mapping. And you can see that these vertexes are kind of pulling on the back side of the arm in a weird way. Where if I did this on the other side, it actually goes much smoother because there's less vertexes to work with. It's just balanced out a little bit better. So let's see if I can clean this up at all. This is going to be a little more challenging, and I want to show you a few more tools that we have going on there. So first, click on Pudgy, your character or your mesh. And then I can just click on the last tool used, with my skin weight tools that'll come up. Or if I need to, I can go to skin and bring up the menu that way again. But I'm just going to bring it up this way. And it did bring back the skin weight painting, but it didn't bring back my menu. Sometimes it does bring back the menu, sometimes it doesn't. So in this case, I will go to skin weight mapping and bring that up, and there's my menu again. So I'm going to want to get this joint here, I believe. So this is going to be the top of my character's right arm. So if I come here to my list and scroll down, there it is, top right arm. Perfect. And I'll probably also want to do the adjacent joints. That's something you end up doing when you're in a chain. I'll have to come over and do some paint work, probably on this center one at the center of my shoulders as well, to get it really truly smoothed out. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of heavy influence here. Maybe I need to paint this down. Maybe I need to paint more in. Let's see what we can come up with. All right, so I'm going to come in here. First off, what happens if I paint more white in? Well, that actually wasn't that bad, but it really made my more distortion go up the back, and that's not what I'm looking for, right? So I'm going to go to replace in paint operation, and I'm going to scroll this down to like a dark gray instead of pure black, and I'm going to bring my opacity down a little bit, and I'm just going to try to softly smooth this out a little bit, and you can see working pretty well. Then I get to a point. You need to move around a bit here. Sometimes a big brush gets too big of an area simultaneously. So I can get in here a little bit and kind of smooth some of this out and smooth out how my mesh is being distorted. Maybe I don't need it to come all the way out to here. You can see I'm already kind of smoothing out the influence a little bit. It's already looking a lot better. Now, in here is the tricky part. Oh, let me get in there a little bit. That's not too bad. Definitely want to bring down the influence. I don't want it to bulge out like that. It's getting better. It's getting better. Let's get back to pudgy here. There we go. And I'm just going to keep kind of trying to influence this. Maybe I bring my opacity down just a little bit more. Now the black and white, I tend to like to keep it simple and use the black and white mode inside skin weight mapping. There's also this color gradient you can turn on if your gradient panel isn't open. You can turn this on and you can see it as a kind of a color gradient, and red being the areas that are influenced the most, and blue being the least. I mean black being the least, and then blue kind of goes from red to orange to yellow to green to blue. So you can see I'm kind of painting in more blue in the green zones. And then if I really want to get in here and try to tweak it, I'm going to have to kind of zoom in on the area, get my brush down nice and small, and kind of try to influence it as much as I can without... See, my problem is I can't see the mesh very well. Like I find the color to be a little distracting, and that's why I like to stick with the black and white. I can still sense the mesh a little bit better this way. But I feel like I'm starting to smooth this out in a nice way. Again, it's going to be this balance of your opacity and your value, fading these in. It's kind of like fine work in Photoshop. And then also getting the right angle in there, like getting up underneath here and smoothing out the side of the body so it doesn't distort so much. In this case, maybe I need to bring the brush up a little bit in size. There we go. And it's the center point of it where it's acting out from. So there we go. Actually, I think that's looking pretty good. At any point, I can hit Q again and get out there and take a look. It's better. This one's going to need a lot of work. And again, this is because I let this area get away from me when I was actually modeling, and it's like more subdivided than the rest of the model. That's half the problem of why it's not distorting properly. All these quads are stretched down into little points and stuff. And again, compare that to this side, and you can see how smoothly it distorts with the rig. So make sure you watch those areas and try to clean them up before you get to this point. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time skin weight mapping. All right. I guess one thing I could do on that arm too is it's kind of stretching my face on the front. So just one more thing I can come in here and do. If I bring that back, see how that influence zone is actually getting into my face? Well, I could come in again and make this a little bit bigger. And let's bring that all the way down to black and bring it up a little bit. And I can just paint that right out so that when I move my arm, it really doesn't affect the face so much. That's much better. Why would I want to affect the face with my arm? I mean, I know my character is like a sack of potatoes, so I guess it technically could, but that's already looking so much better in the way it's distorting from front to back. So, as you can probably see, you can spend a lot of time refining your skin weight mapping, getting your mesh to distort just the way you want with your rig. What areas do you want it to push on? What areas do you not? There we go. That's nice. Starting to come in. Smooth it all out all around. And you just got to keep testing and moving things around, and you're going to animate and push your mesh into new boundaries, and you're going to realize, oh wow, that really distorted the mesh. Let me go back in and paint it some more. You can always get in there and tweak it. But try to get your skin weight mapping done before you start animating, because then if you go and paint it after the fact and then you think it looked good in one shot and then you go back to that and everything's all kind of tweaked out because you painted it again later on, these things can't affect each other. So try to test out all the different motions and degrees and try to push and pull it as far as you think your character is going to go. There we go. It's looking pretty good. All right. I think that's all I've got for you on skin weight mapping. Dig in. Let me know if you have any questions. And as always, thank you for tuning in.